What's up? When you're scared or nervous or anxious, do you tend to like walk away, try to find somewhere safe, maybe go be by yourself, relax, take it easy? Well, today you're in luck because we're going to talk about doing the opposite and going towards what scares you or running towards the danger. I'm Danny, everybody. Randy, this is the Existential Stoic podcast. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Yeah, so I came up with this idea. I got it from listening to something else where they're talking about this idea of like going towards what scares you or going towards what like causes us normally like stress and stuff. Because as a way to kind of like both experience new things, but also overcome these things that are kind of being limits. And one of the reasons why I think this interests me, I'll say now, is that like I feel like a lot of times now you hear people talk about like anxiety and like stress or like well any number of things, but they talk about it as these like fixed limits where like it seems like they'll like almost like they use it as like I don't want to say like a crutch or like a you know something to blame for them not doing these other things that they clearly want to do. And it seems like, most of our methods for dealing with this, and don't get me wrong, I think there are times you need to like obviously step back, or there's times where, you need to like calm down if you're having a panic attack or something, but that just always walking away is not going to help either, though, long term. And I thought it'd be interesting to discuss this. I know, what are your th have you ever had these experiences like going towards?
Well, I'm glad you say that because in that book that I was talking about, Feeling Great and Feeling Good, I mean, he addresses anxiety all the time, and there's two parts to it. There's one, the mental aspect of it, like you have to be mentally ready to do it, but the second part is exposure therapy. Like you have to do the thing that you're scared of. That's the only way to get around it. And so,
Yeah.
like, that's the crazy thing about anxiety is people just they end up just being afraid of being afraid. Like they're afraid of the fear. And
Yeah.
that just goes into this whole fear loop cycle that makes it worse and worse. And the only way you can break out of that is to address your fear and just do the thing. And it's going to be terrible. And like he talks about in the book how he used to have a fear of heights, but he wanted to be on the um what's it called? The people who do the plays, but they have the people behind the scenes, stage crew. He wanted to be on
Oh, they
stage
go
crew.
like up top and do the lights and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's high.
So he wanted to be on stage crew, except he had like an extreme fear of heights. And so the guy in charge of the play was like, "Hey, listen, you want to be on stage crew, but you need to get over your fear of heights. There's a ladder. Go stand on the top of it, and I will stand down here underneath you for as long as it takes for you to get over it." And he's like, "I climbed up there, and I was terrified." And 5 minutes later, the guy checked in on him. He's like, "How you doing?" He's like, "I'm still terrified. This is horrible." And he's like, "Okay, fine. I'm just waiting down here. I'll be here for you if you need me." And another 5 minutes, he's still terrified. But then after like 15 minutes, he felt okay and it was gone. And that was the end of his fear.
Nothing happened, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's that realization that the things that you imagined happening, because I think that's the problem with anxiety is like it's like a mental thing, but a combination with imagination. And so like
Mhm.
we build up these like stories of what's going to happen and expect it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just listening to that today because I've been listening to his podcast like from the beginning. So Feeling Good podcast has like
I'll have to
400
check
some
that out.
episodes. And dude, I just started episode one and just work your way through because it's freaking awesome. But he was just talking about that today, where what were you mentioning because
Our
before I
imagination with
started?
anxiety, our
Oh,
imagination builds up these
exactly.
stories.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So anxiety only exists because of our future prediction.
Yeah.
So it won't exist if we're not able to predict the future. And this is one of the cognitive biases we talked about previously, where people predict the future, either predicting what other people will say, predicting outcomes that'll happen. And that's where anxiety exists. And it's actually, he calls it like one of life's biggest lies or something like that,
Good
because
way to look at
it's
it.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's blown out of proportion.
And it is like a lie, right? It's like a lie to ourselves. And I think in some sense I get it because like in some sense like it is it's a protective measure, right? Like, we might have a minor fear about something and then we blow it up in our heads as a way to kind of give us an out to protect us from that, right? And it's funny because I remember like when I first went to get my master's, it was part of the master's like it was a teaching program. So we taught, and you'd assist a professor first, then if you did well, you do your own course. And like, everybody, I don't care who you are, right, that has to stand up in front of a class for the first time and teach, it's nerve-wracking, especially college kids, because they're not like little kids. They're like old enough to like have opinions and like
Mhm.
ideas and like question you. And so a lot of the kids, and myself too, right, we were all nervous going in. And like you imagine in your head what you look like to the audience. And that makes it worse. Like anybody that's ever presented would know this, right? Like the
Hmm.
shaking, the fear, stuttering, things like that, because you're like, nervous losing your place. And so one of the things they did that was really interesting was they actually, you could request this, I forget what they were called, but it was like a, whatever. It might have been Teaching and Learning Center or something, but they would come and record you.
Hmm.
And then they would sit down with you afterwards and play the recording and talk about it. And it was interesting because like I think everybody in my class, I know, like not like my group of graduate students, I remember all of us, we talked about it afterwards and all said the same thing. Like we all thought we looked like really nervous, one, like shaking, like, you could like almost see the paper and all. And we're doing maybe like things that like maybe would like, putting our hands in our pockets, like, or like doing stuff that like showed nervousness, whatever. But when you watch the video, one, the first thing you realize is like, it's not that noticeable, as you think. Like you might notice it, but it's not as bad as you think. Two, you also notice the class doesn't actually care because like most people understand that like one, you're this is new to you and stuff like that. So most people are pretty forgiving. And like it was nice because they also would point things out and be like, see here where like you're doing this. Like if you're mindful of that, like you can actually stop it. And it's like you have to do this thing again too. So it kind of helps to just like kind of reflect on it and then just move past it and keep doing it. And I noticed like
Hmm.
for myself, like it took a while. It actually wasn't that like I didn't really get comfortable doing it till probably like really like a couple years later. And when I was teaching, like often that I really got started to get more and more comfortable. And part of that too was just preparation too. Like getting comfortable with knowing like, okay, I know this stuff. But I think it's if I just had like gotten scared and walked away, I never would have had that experience, right? I never would have been able to do that thing.
Well, yeah, you make a good point because there's two aspects to getting over anything. There's one, the process of doing it, so like the exposure, doing the thing that you're afraid of doing, but also there's the outcome that like the reason that we do stuff that we don't like is because it actually gives us some benefits.
Yeah,
Like people who worry, people who have anxiety, they actually do that because, well, they think maybe it protects them, or maybe they don't want to look like a fool or maybe all these other things that there are benefits of it. And so until they're able to get over that obstacle, it's just not worth doing
yeah,
because they're just going to resist it all the time. Because if you tell somebody stop worrying, but they think their worrying saves their children or something like that,
yeah.
they're not going to stop doing it because if they stop worrying, then they've essentially killed their children.
Yeah, right. That benefits, that's a huge benefit that's gonna be hard to overcome, right? Well, it's
Hmm.
funny too, because the teaching thing was helpful because like I was getting funding from it and getting income from it. So like I kind of needed to do it. I didn't have a choice, right? Because I couldn't afford to be there otherwise. So like that helped because like that benefit was so great that it was like, all right, I just gotta kind of bear with it. But it got easier as time went on. I think this is the thing I think we forget. Like we make these experiences so scary in our heads that we don't even try them. But the reality is like other people are doing it. Like whatever it is you want to do, probably other people are doing it. So it's doable, one.
Hmm.
And two, like it's usually just a matter of, yeah, going towards it instead of running away. And I think it's such a shame that we've gotten to this point where like I think especially like you watch, I know social media and stuff, like people like talk about these things like a badge of honor. And it's like, but it's such a limitation. Like
Hmm.
you're preventing yourself from doing things like you said that are new, that are beneficial. And look, any new skill or any new experience we want to have is going to be new. So that means
Hmm.
it's going to be anxious, right? There's going to be fear. And if you don't learn to overcome that, you're never going to do these things. You're going to always be stuck in whatever place you're in, and it's never going to change.
Yeah. So, so going back to kind of the idea of swimming towards the shark, that was an interesting episode. So Danny shared with me earlier in the week a podcast about swimming towards the shark. These guys who, when one of their friends was being attacked by the shark, they just went out and they
Yeah.
swam towards the shark. And it was very interesting. And I found it interesting because I used to do this open water swimming back when I lived in the Caribbean. I would go out and we would swim a mile every morning, and I was terrified of sharks, like
Yeah.
absolutely terrified. And down on this island, they had bull sharks, which is one of the most aggressive type of
Oh
sharks.
God. Yeah.
And so like while I was doing that, I would be like visualizing that there was just a pod of dolphins just following me along to protect me in case a shark came. Because I was literally like every day we went in there and we swam, I was just terrified that a shark was just going to come and like eat me while I was swimming. And it was funny because one day we were swimming and like when you're swimming, most of the time you're just looking straight down at the ground. But when you breathe, you turn to the side. And so I turned to the side and I saw what looked like a shark's dorsal fin out of the water. And I almost shit myself in the water. And then I realized that there were these manta rays swimming next to us, and like their wings come up to like the tip comes
Ah.
out of the water. But oh my gosh, I like jumped out of my skin because I thought there was a shark like right there next to me.
Isn't that funny though? Because you did that like every day, but we're still scared of it. Because like
Hmm.
I've swam in the ocean before too, and like anybody that does, I think, like especially when you get past the surf, you don't know what's down there. You can't
Hmm.
tell how deep it is usually, right? Because it's like turned up. There is this level of like I think that's like the dark kind of thing, like the unknown, and
Hmm.
that's what makes it so scary too. And you can imagine all these things and like, but it's also like it's funny because when you think about like sharks are, it's a funny thing because it's like it's so rare. Like you hear
Hmm.
about shark attacks because they report on them, but the reality is like the percentage of people that actually get attacked is so low. It's
Hmm.
ridiculous. Like,
Oh,
and they
it's
don't
way
even
more
like people.
dangerous just to drive a car
Yeah.
or probably to like eat some freaking fast food. That's way more dangerous because you're guaranteed to die. Here's an interesting thing. So like a lot of people are afraid of flying. And in order for flying to actually become a significant risk, you would have to fly 24 hours a day for about 600 years in order for it to be statistically
Yeah.
dangerous.
Well, that's
Like
what's
that's how safe it is.
funny too. We do all this stuff every day that is actually really dangerous. Like driving cars is a great example, right? If you look at the statistics of how many people die or get seriously injured because of car accidents and stuff, it's really high. Your chances are actually fairly good, but we do it all the time because one, we have to, because otherwise, especially in the US, like you can't rely on public transportation. And two, it's like because it's normalized, we don't we don't even process the fear basically, or process the danger, right? The risk. So it's kind of funny that like I think that's the other side of anxiety too, which that shows you it's a lie, is that you already, if you reflect on your own life, you're already doing all these things that are dangerous, that have risk, but you do them with no issue. So why is it that like in these cases it's fine, but like, because
Mhm.
I think about that sometimes too, right? It's funny, I'll go back to the teaching example because there's no risk of me getting hurt. Right. Literally, the greatest risk when you're standing in front presenting is maybe you'll get embarrassed or maybe you'll do something awkward. But really, I mean, what's going to happen, right?
You
And it's
know,
funny that like you blow that out of proportion, right? But then you're doing something that could literally kill you.
hmm
Statistically, you have a good chance, but you normalized it and it doesn't even matter.
hmm yeah. It's kind of interesting. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. So like it's gonna hurt, and like sometimes you're like, no, no. But that's essentially what you're doing with anxiety in your mind,
Yeah,
where like you're able to play that area where you can imagine the pain, and then you can go back to like ignoring it and the comfort of that, and you just go back and forth in that area instead of just ripping the damn thing off, experiencing the actual pain that's there, and then it just be gone.
yeah. It's really funny too, because dude, I remember like when I was really struggling with depression too, like I know like I would like turn away from things all the time. And I realized after a while, like the only way to move forward is to just stop doing that, which was hard. It sucked.
Hmm.
I didn't want to deal with the world. I didn't want to deal with, the problems I had. I didn't want to deal with any of that. And it's like, it sucks. So I started small, but then once I started to see that, oh, I can still do, like, it's still doable,
Hmm.
and then things start to get better. And I think that's the other side of this, like, people are, well, why should I like go towards things if they're like bad for me if I'm scared of it? It's like, well, because you also realize that like you can do it and starting small is a good way and it gets better and easier over time. Like I
Hmm.
like the example too, the guy scared of heights. Like just go up there and stand up there. Nobody's asking you to
Hmm.
do anything, you know, crazy, like stand up, hang over the railing or anything, right? Just stand up there because that's what the job's going to require. And, realize that you can do it basically, and it's not going to collapse under your feet.
Yeah, he does. He talks about a whole bunch of exposure therapy he does with clients, and it's something that works in like 1 2 hour session. Like they've had this fear for years or decades, and all of a sudden it's gone in 1 2 hour session. But like people who are afraid of germs, who are constantly washing their hands, he'll have them like start going around his office just touching everything and not washing their hands, and then eventually like touching a toilet bowl and the lifting up the lid and touching the toilet bowl and not washing their hands, and then going outside and like touching inside of a trash can and then wiping it on their face. And
Uh,
like it's like crazy exposure
yeah,
therapy because even like I don't have
I don't want
an
to do
aversion
that.
to germs, but I don't want to do that
Yeah,
either.
no.
It's just like, but like it's something where once he breaks the mental barrier, then he does the exposure therapy with him, and then it's just like gone.
But
completely gone.
that is the funniest thing with fear and anxiety. It's a mental barrier that like it is funny that when you break through it, it's like it never existed. It's so weird. It is like because I've had that experience where like this
Mhm.
fear about something that's so great, and then all of a sudden it's just like it just isn't there anymore. You just realize that like it's just a situation that you can do and it's nothing. And it's so funny because it shows you how much we build it up in our heads and blow it out of proportion and make these things into be like these horrible experiences that really aren't that bad, you
Mhm.
know? And
Yeah.
it's a shame we don't do it more. And I think, and it's funny because the other reason why I like that was like the woman in that episode, it was a This American Life episode that we were talking about, right? Who got the concussion. And, all her doctors told her, like, because she was having like basically post-concussion symptoms, like migraines and stuff for like 3.5 years, I think she said, which is like, think about that. It's like ruins your life, basically. She had little kids and stuff. And all the doctors, I mean, the common therapy at the time was just like, do what you can, but stop as soon as basically it gets uncomfortable and rest. And basically never pushing yourself to the point where you have to deal with with the sensory information, with the overload, with the headaches in any way that's uncomfortable. And so you're always limiting yourself and putting the brakes on. And it's funny that like the way through that was just to go the opposite. Like the
Hmm.
doctor that actually healed her told her to no, go more to like go to the grocery store, deal with the sound, the lights,
Hmm.
all that crap, deal with all this and suffer through it to make because you got to get your brain to like essentially rewire. And I think
Yeah.
that's similar with anxiety. It's like a rewiring, right? You're taking like this fear and this imagination, like changing it into like, oh, okay, it's just fine.
Yeah. I have a feeling probably in like 20 or 50 years, we'll look back on medicine as it's being done right now and we'll be like, oh my gosh, those guys are barbarians. Because like there's a whole
Yeah,
bunch of new stuff coming out with like the new neuroscience, especially chronic pain and a whole bunch of these. Basically, like medicine is good at a few specific things. Like
yeah,
a trauma incident, not like childhood trauma, but like trauma like accident,
yeah,
broken bones, that type of thing. Medicine is very good at that. Medicine is very good at an infection. You get an infection, you take an antibiotic, it's done. Medicine is very good at diabetes. You get diabetes, you take insulin, it's done. But all these chronic things that medicine is managing is just it's broken. It doesn't work. But
yeah,
they're trying to do the best that they can. It's just they don't have an answer. And so chronic pain is something that's been that way for a while. And we're discovering now that like chronic pain, anxiety, depression, all these things, they don't need medication. There's a few simple things that you need to address,
yeah.
but like it's not the common way of doing things right now. And it's causing a lot of people a lot of problems.
Oh yeah, because I think we're learning too that it's the brain is very powerful.
Hmm.
And I think we're learning that a lot of these things have more to do with our mental state rather than something physical. The physical is just a symptom of that. And
Yep.
it's interesting because, it's like, but that point you're making about medicine makes total sense. Think about it. Like, if we look back at the 1800s, even the 1900s, we think their medicine was appalling, right? You had even like the early 1900s, like 30s and stuff, right? I mean, the physicians not washing their hands and stuff, it's like
Yeah.
crazy. But now it's like way different, but it hasn't progressed that far. We're basically in like a second iteration of that first one. So yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. That's a good way to look at it. Like we'll probably in 50 years look back and think like, oh my God, I can't believe we were doing that to people. Like we were just
Hmm.
prolonging things rather than helping. And we talk about
Like,
like well, so much of our medication is just symptom based. It's not looking at what's the causal factor in this situation that's making it happen, right?
yeah. So like even okay, so this book Feeling Good. They've done a whole bunch of studies on this book, like giving the book to depressed patients. And they just give them the book. Don't even make
Yeah.
them read the book. They just say, this person's depressed, we'll give them the book. And then they study 4 weeks later, 60 some percent of them get better, which is just from maybe reading the book, probably reading the book, but like not guaranteed reading the book. And that's like more statistically significant than all of these the medications that we're giving, like the selective serotonin, all the Prozac, everything. That's like barely better than a placebo.
Yeah,
But this
barely. I mean, most
actually,
of them
yeah,
are barely. Yeah.
hmm yeah. But this actually has something, and it's just like it's still not commonly prescribed, common knowledge, that type of thing.
Because it's so much, and I think this is the other part too, is that, we've gotten in the habit with modern medicine where it's easier to take a pill. It is.
Hmm.
I mean, and I think that's
Yeah.
also the problem, right? Is like all the other things are hard. So
Yeah.
it's at the time it's easier to do that. I remember getting in fights with my doctor when I had depression because he was like kept trying to put me
Hmm.
on something. Like I don't want to be on it because one I know like one if it doesn't work and you have to switch, like they're hard to switch. A lot of the medications
Hmm.
there you have to wean off and start a new one. There's all this blood back and forth, which doesn't help the situation. And I also
Hmm.
knew I was like that stuff is chances of it working are not great anyway, and it doesn't mean it's going to fix anything. It might help in the immediate, but I still have to do stuff anyway. So I might as well try to do the stuff to make it better,
Hmm.
instead of
Yeah.
doing it that way. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
one of the
crazy.
episodes that I listened to of the podcast today is that he has this type of CBT therapy called TEAM. It's an acronym. T is the first one, which is like tracking. So basically asking questions about where people are before and after each session. So and it's crazy because every other type of science, we need to track things. But in psychotherapy, they don't track anything. And he's like, it's crazy because therapists have no idea what's going on
Yep.
with their patients. Like they started doing this where they would track therapists with their patients and have them both fill out the forms before and after. They would have the patient fill out like, depression, anxiety, a couple other things, and then they would have the therapist afterwards fill out the same thing, like where do you think the patient is, and then also how well do you think the session went, like how empathetic were you with the patient, and they would ask the therapist, so like how well do you think your things would correlate with the patients, and they like, oh, probably like 80%, something like that. Like I know what my patient's thinking. It was like 3%.
Yeah,
Like they have literally no idea what's going on with their patients, and these are guys who like people go to for years and they have no
yeah.
idea what's going on with their
Because I see
patients
them
without
for
tracking it.
they see them for like an hour or what, maybe a week or a month at
Hmm.
most. And it's funny because that's the other side of this that kills me is like I remember when I was looking for a therapist because I knew like I know my personality. Like I need somebody that's gonna push back
Hmm.
against me or I'll either like justify everything or, walk around them or not take them seriously, basically. And it's
Hmm.
funny because like I've seen so many people like that I know who've gone to therapists and it's like they just seem to support whatever the person says. And it's like that's great to like be empathetic to a point, but you're not helping them. You're not like doing anything to make
Hmm.
them better. And that's the
Yeah.
point of it, right? Like it's not just talking. It should be like actually like active, I guess, and
Yeah.
doing something. I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah. And also like the therapist wanting to help is actually one of the biggest things that causes resistance to treatment. So
Oh,
because
really?
like yeah, because like a lot of people like I was talking about earlier, this outcome resistance. So like are the way that they are and they do the things that they do because it gives them some benefit. Either they
Yeah.
get some benefit now, like for instance, like an alcoholic. I mean, it's destroying their life, it's destroying their family. They may have killed people with like DUIs and stuff like that. But for them, it's one of the few pleasures they have in life. And giving up alcohol, it doesn't make sense because why would you give up one of the few pleasures you have in life?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. So like therapists, when they want to help someone without addressing the resistance first, it causes more resistance to come up because uh, the person doesn't want to change. But once the
Yeah.
therapist can kind of like work with that resistance in order to basically be the patient with the resistance and be like, are you sure you want to change? Because I mean, it looks pretty good. This is the one pleasure you have left in life. Are
Yeah.
you sure you want to give this up? And then they're like, yeah, I need to. Well, then you can start working on it together as opposed to like someone trying to fix you.
That is a good way to look at it though, because it is true, right? It's like it's amazing too how like we'll convince ourselves of benefit where like there isn't any, almost. And like the alcohol like
Hmm.
addiction's a good example, things like that, where like, it's like from the perspective of the individual, it seems like a benefit because it's hard to change anything and it's probably screwed up your life so much that it's like the thought of dealing with all that is so great that it's like you're still hiding basically. But it's like it's funny because unless you address it, like, it won't change. And that's true. I mean, it makes total sense, right? And I think if we think about all of our life like that, I actually like that tracking idea. That would be a good way to start thinking of like maybe our own sort of fears and anxiety is like start sitting down and asking yourself, like, what benefit am I getting from not walking towards it? How is this
Well, that's
benefiting me?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
because that's what you need to figure out is like what are the because like all of the things that we think are terrible about us, and he goes into this like in depth in the book Feeling Great. So that book can really do a lot of justice. But like all the stuff that we don't like about ourselves and that we want to change and that we're embarrassed of, all of these things are actually giving us benefit. And there's actually like great things about it, but we just need to figure out what those are and then recognize, is this something that I want to change? Because it may actually not be something you want to change.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's something that you want to change a little bit. Like you don't need to completely eliminate it, but maybe just turn it down a little bit.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it too. I like that. Because then you can also confront the situations where like, is this benefit even a benefit too? Like, because if I really want, like, I think, especially when we're talking about like, doing new things or developing new skills, like, like if I really want that, is this benefit of the fear and stuff really helping or not? And then actually
Mhm.
address that and see, because then you can ask yourself, get to the core values, right? Which I think it's funny because that's really what drives us for everything, right? It's just value. It's just benefit. It's positive, negative. I mean, we're pretty, and at the end of the day, I think we're fairly simple. We just make
Uh-huh.
it complicated.
Yeah. I don't know. Every time I listen, like I end up listening to Marcus Aurelius meditations on YouTube about once a month now. And
It's a
every
great
time I
book,
do,
though.
I'm always like so blown away that like, A, this dude knew all this stuff 2000 some years ago, and B, he knew all this stuff, and essentially he seems like the ultimate human. He's still dead. And it's
Yeah.
like gone.
You
Yeah.
know what? That always blew my mind with philosophers is that like by just thinking about themselves, people, the human condition, they were able to arrive at so many really interesting ideas and important developments. Like stuff, it's funny because like there's so many times I'll hear about advancements in psychology. And I'm like, philosophy already talked about that like ages ago, dude. Come on. Like,
Yeah,
and I bet you got that idea from Marcus Aurelius, from Nietzsche or something. Like, it's
probably.
funny.
Yeah.
But it's like it's interesting that like it's just self-examination. Like we're not that different. Most of us, we pretend like we are, or we think we are because it's hard for us to imagine other people having like that internal world. But the reality is
Hmm.
most people are going through the same things. And like I think we need to do more facing of these fears because we see so much now in contemporary society of turning away. And I think it's really damaging and hurting lives and causing people to be afraid of doing stuff. And like I even know, like, even when we decided to do the programming and coding thing, like that was scary because it was like a huge change. Like I knew like I hated my job, but it's like, it was one of those situations where like that was familiar, right? And it's like even though I really wanted to do this other thing, it's like, can I, how do I give up something really familiar to do something new when you
Hmm.
don't 100% know? Because like the situation, even if something sucks, the situation, right? You know what to
Hmm.
expect, you know how it's going to play out, but something new, even if it could be great, you don't know exactly what it's going to be, and that's where I think that difficulty lies in making that transition. But if you don't do it, nothing ever
Hmm.
happens. Like,
True. True. And like something else that I heard that was really cool. So like, you know how like I talk about this a lot, and I know you feel this, is like the concept where you feel like you can't do enough. And then you look at all that you have to do, all that you have to learn, and it just seems like overwhelming.
oh God, yeah, all the time.
And so in one of the books he was talking about like what if every time you sat down to eat a meal, you thought about all the food that you have to eat in your entire life. You know, like all the breakfasts, all the lunches, all the dinners, all the desserts and the ice cream and the birthday cakes and all of that stuff. And you thought about all of that stuff in your entire life that you have to eat. And you'd look at your meal here and you'd just be like, well, this is just a drop in the bucket. What's the point of this? And it's like we do the same thing with things that are important to us in life and then we give up. And it's just like that was like a really cool perspective shift because I was like, holy cow, I do that all the time.
That is a good way, dude. I do that constantly too. And I used to do it a lot more. I know, like especially when I was really depressed, because like that was like the time where like it just seems so hard. Like you'd imagine like, well, I have that debt I got to deal with. I have
Hmm.
those personal relationships I have to fix or whatever. And it's like it just seems so insurmountable,
Yep.
to even do those things because you're
Yeah.
thinking about going from where you are now to the finished product
Hmm.
without any of the intermediate. And I like the food example is great. It's like going from like one meal to the entirety of what you have to eat in your life. Like, yeah, that's an insane amount of stuff, right? Like nobody wants to
Yeah.
do that. So it
Yeah.
seems impossible, but it's not when you spread it out over day by day, hour by hour,
Yeah.
you know.
And like the con part of the con that depression plays is the hopelessness that comes in. So
Yeah.
like, any you can do anything if you know it's going to end or it's going to get better, but like depression, it just makes it seem like it's going to be that way forever.
Yeah.
And that's just the hopelessness is brutal.
Well, it sucks, right? And then you get to that point where you're just like, yeah, it feels hopeless and it's horrible, right?
Hmm.
And it is,
Yep.
it's funny because yeah, it's funny. I do that so much though with stuff now too. Like where I see like I have all these things I want to do and it just seems so much stuff. But then it's like when you do your day by day, you get a lot done. It's really funny, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the only way forward is to keep doing it. So
Yeah, I've been playing around with those the cognitive distortions we were talking about because like I noticed that when a lot of times recently when I'm in a bad mood it's because I'm overgeneralizing. Like something will happen and
yeah,
then I'll make it mean that like my whole life is terrible. And
yeah.
like and it's never going to get any better. And so what I've been doing is like when I'm not feeling good, I keep telling myself be specific, be specific, be
Well, that's a
specific
good idea.
to like figure out what's actually wrong. And then I'm like, okay, it's just this one thing that's wrong.
Yeah.
Like I'm still doing fine over here, and this is still good, and everything's fine, and I can actually address this thing. But like it's just this one, but it's so easy to blow it completely out of proportion,
Yeah,
overgeneralize.
I do. All right, it's funny how our minds work. It really is. That's a good way.
Hmm.
Actually, I like that. I'm gonna borrow that from you because, yeah, dude, I mean, there's been so many times where like I'm like, I can't do this. There's just too much. I'll never get this thing done. Especially with like coding stuff and stuff when I get overwhelmed.
Hmm.
And then I
Yeah.
realize I'm like tired. And like, that was the issue because like then I'll wake up the next day, I'm like, all right, I'm fine, let's go. And it's funny how like your mood can be so influenced by that, by like these things that like have in some sense nothing to do with it, but really what you just need is maybe a break or maybe like
Hmm.
you sleep or whatever, or to eat. And I like that idea of being specific because that's a way to like kind of work through that. But I think it's
Hmm.
funny because like that is the hard part, I think, for everybody in dealing with anything or doing anything new and facing like what they're scared of. It's just that like you just have to kind of face it and be honest with yourself and actually think through things and reflect. And we don't do that often. I think most people,
Easier to get distracted.
yeah, it's easier to get distracted. It's easier to push it away. It's easier for things to stay the status quo. And then you hear people complaining all the time about how like things are working out, this ain't great. It's like, well, you're not, but you haven't done anything to make it better. It's like,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
all right.
I
Well,
think
there
that
you
was a
have.
nice long episode.
Yeah, it was good. It's an interesting topic, though. I think I wish people would do it more, and it's very helpful. But that's good. Yeah, it's a lot of good resources too. Maybe we can link some of those as well. So
Hmm.
hopefully, you like this episode, and hopefully, you'll start going towards what scares you or running towards the danger. To kind of get over these things and start doing new things. If you like this, please like, share, subscribe. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Um, there's the Existential Stoic podcast. We'll be back later with another episode. Until then, though, later, Randy.
Later, Danny.